I like you. You're a great guy.
Dan is grateful for Tim.
No, tell me.
Dan, I don't just like you, Dan. I love you as a brother.
Oh,
and I'm
Tim.
so glad that we're friends because...
Tim, I love you too. Let's look at each other in the eyes.
Okay, and stare.
I love you.
I love you too, Dan.
I think
love
this
you,
is
Tim.
somewhat of a well-being
Dan, even
exercise
more.
that's happening
I
right
love you, Tim.
Well, we have some amazing guests with us here today from our very close group of friends. We are so lucky to have a close group of friends as we are in our early mid-adult years. And, you know, something that we kind of talk about as a friend group is that there are a lot of things that you go through in these years of your lives, right? In your 30s particularly, a lot of major life changes, whether that's challenges that happen in your romantic life, in your family planning, in career changes, or just dealing with stress because lots of shit happens and it can be hard. And because we're lucky enough to have each other, we do promote a lot of like talking and sharing with each other, but we also talk about supporting each other and going to therapy. And a thing that we did recently that's a little bit different is we explored another type of like healing modality, right? And we went to this place in LA that specializes in, it's kind of like meditation wellness, but we'll share a little bit more about that. But that's what today's episode is going to be about, is us talking about that experience that we had and what the significance of it was for each of us individually.
Yes. So it was our friend Dan. This is Dan.
I'm Dan.
It was his birthday, and we decided to take the opportunity to visit this place called the Breathing Room, which is a place in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. It is a meditative space. It has like meditation pods, lounges, domes, all the meditative things that I'm not familiar with, and Janet might be way more familiar with. But, you know, each of us, we are going through something in our lives, whether it's grief or stress or anxiety, whatever it is, we are all going through something. And so this felt like the perfect time for Dan's birthday to try something new out to, you know, just like nourish our souls. So we're going to be talking about that today, and just excited to have these two back on the podcast. They are not new to the pod. This is your second time returning back. Yes? Each of you. But you were not on the same episode.
I believe so. This might be your third time, right?
This is my third time.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I thought you've done 3 episodes too.
I've been in a lot of maybe wacky videos, but officially on the podcast. Oh, you know what it is? It was one big episode split into 2.
That's right. The ABB ones with Philip. That's the one that
but haven't you already done, you've done like a mini episode with Janet though, right?
With Mel, you did.
Oh,
man.
Yeah, the mini episodes
so
count.
Okay, so yes. So
I am an ABG. Yeah, I came in here. I knew the episodes.
Okay, so this is my 4th technically.
Wow. Okay.
The first on video.
Yes.
First on video.
First time on video. Yes. Now you can see their faces.
Yeah.
Yes. And you said this is your 3rd time?
My 3rd time.
Yes. We have like 300 episodes. Okay. It's hard to remember.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So go check them out. Just type in AsianBossGirl, Dan, Tim to hear those episodes. But anyway, excited to have you both on. So Jen and I, we were going to check out this meditation space. Not sponsored, by the way. We're going to check out the space. And we invited the 2 of you. And you both said yes, which was kind of surprising. But at the same time, I was like, oh, you both are always down. When we first brought it up to you, like, what did you think? Because we've never done something like that before, ever, as a group.
I'll say that it came at a perfect time for me. And so I was really looking for something like that because the last 2 months specifically have been very difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think that when there was an opportunity that just felt like it would have helped me, I was looking for something and the universe provided it basically in this opportunity to do the breathing exercises and the meditation room. So I was super on board. I couldn't wait for it.
Oh, that's great to hear. For me, maybe a little bit different. I am exploring different things within my life in terms of maybe a little bit of a career shift, maybe doing some things a little bit more creative. And I've always been interested in kind of like unique places like this, but I didn't really want to do it alone. So the fact that we were going to do it together and be able to talk about it, and especially to celebrate Dan's birthday, it was kind of like also a perfect storm in a very different way. So I was very like glad that in a way you all had found something great for us to kind of jump into. I'm sure I would have done search paralysis and looked online for like a million different things and compared them side by side. But in a way, you guys were excited about it. And so I was like, perfect, let's do it.
So this place, the Breathing Room, had a bunch of different options. They have, I think Helen had mentioned there's like domes, and they even have like a VR experience. But we opted, each of us, for a combination, and it was 30 minutes inside of a pod and 30 minutes in a Micro-Vibroacoustic Meditation Lounge. And so you have these two experiences, 30 minutes each, but you also get to choose a theme when you go inside, right? And each of the themes, they were things like calm, energy, healing. I noticed that I think it was all three of you had chosen healing, right? Can you talk a little bit about why you chose healing out of all of the different possible themes?
Yeah, I would actually say that like when we were choosing it, I was kind of surprised that three of us did choose healing because I feel like whatever you choose is really indicative of where you are in life. It's kind of like you're picking what the medicine that you need for your soul. And I'm like, oh, what are my friends going through that they need healing of all the things? You know, there were many things on the list. There was like 20 plus things, right? Like aspire and manifest and love and all of this stuff. And we all chose healing. So super curious why the two of you chose healing.
I actually think that I didn't choose healing, or that I
what?
Well, I think my first choice was something else. There were a lot of different options, and I think that I leaned more towards something else that maybe it was called anxiety, or like there was another thing that I wanted to start with, but then based off of the recommendation for like, oh, this is maybe a better first one to do, intro, then I went with. I'm not mad at it at all, but I think opened up my choice to healing because it was one of the first things that they said that you should probably do.
Yeah. So Dan and I actually arrived around the same time, and you two had already started your first session. So in a way, we kind of got the same spiel. And shout out Dr. Miranda, who is actually the owner and was doing a great job introing us to kind of all the ideology behind the different options. It was in a way a little bit overwhelming. For me, what caught my attention was the healing guidance. At first, it had a guided meditation. There were other ones that did not. And that was one thing I wanted as a first timer. The second was that when I read the description, it talked a lot about the connection between like the nervous system, the immune system, as well as, you know, kind of regulating your emotions and such. So I almost wanted that, if I can call it a combo package of seeing how would I feel across the board, and maybe something would jump out to me after the fact. So that's kind of what jumped out to me. But there were a lot of options, and maybe just dovetailing on Dan's feeling, in a way, it was almost like, I don't know what to pick, but this sounds good, and just kind of being steered that way to one degree.
Yeah. I really like the one that we ultimately got. I thought it was good, and I really enjoyed. I think that having the guided meditation part was probably the thing that I needed the most, just somebody to tell me exactly what it was I was supposed to do with the breathing. And so they probably would have done that with some of the other ones that maybe I could have picked, but healing was great to start off with.
Yeah. And the reason why I had chose healing also is because I think with my my recent miscarriage, there has been sort of this like emptiness or this void that I've been feeling in me. So of everything that was on the page, like nothing stood out to me more than the healing one did, because I feel like that is something that I just need in my life right now. Even though I feel like really happy in so many areas and having such good friends too and such good support, there is always going to be this like void of perhaps like just grief or something that's going to be with me forever. So that was definitely something I wanted to focus on. And I think meditation in itself, like I'm not a good meditator. So to your point of like having a guided meditation, that was so important to me. I was like, I need that one for sure. I really do believe in the power of meditation because I hear it from Janet all the time. Like, damn, she'll be sitting in the corner, like in the middle of our meeting, just like meditating. I'm like, how are you doing that? That's crazy. The fact that you're able to do that, I find so powerful that you can do that, right? So that is something that I've been hearing over and over again as something that can really transform your mental state. And that also affects your physical well-being too, when you're in a good mental state. So overall, that's why I chose healing and also why I found interest in the breathing room. But I know, Janet, you chose something different, right? You chose Aspire.
I chose Aspire. I was actually back and forth a lot. I was looking at healing as well, mostly because she said it's like a good intro. And I've shared on the podcast, like the last year of my life has been really challenging. I feel like I had kind of, going through some major big shifts in my romantic life that also just impacted what I think about what I want for life in general now. I think when you go through something like that in your late 30s and you envisioned a future with someone that took up so much of what you thought your life would look like, it really rocked me, and I'm still going through it. And I think I leaned toward Aspire versus healing because I feel like I'm in a place now where I want to feel more inspired and figure out what is this next version of myself, or what is the thing that I want to aim towards. It's kind of like I feel like I've like knocked down the wall and I'm trying to rebuild it now. And healing is always, like Helen said, you're always going to be kind of going through it, right? But the phase I'm at now is like, okay, it's broken. Things are broken. How do I want to rebuild? So that's kind of why I leaned a little more towards Aspire. Hi, ABGs. Are you looking to hire? If so, I would recommend checking out Indeed, a matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. Wow, that is a lot. According to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Hiring can be a real painful and time-consuming task. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. I mean, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it well. One of the standout qualities of Indeed for me is how many people are on the platform, so you have a greater chance of matching with the right candidate. I mean, there are 350 million monthly unique visitors and an extended reach through Glassdoor. Who can beat that? Not only that, but their matching engine is next level. They leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, so they're constantly learning from your preferences. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ABG. Just go to Indeed.com/ABG right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/ABG. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
So let's walk through what this process was like. And I'm going to ask Tim to tell the story because I love his storytelling. It's just, I don't know, it's hilarious. Not to put pressure on you, but walk our listeners through what that experience is like, going to the breathing room and what these meditation pods are like.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Okay.
Please, any of you jump in if I make a mistake or if you want to add some color. So as I kind of alluded to, you first walk in, beautiful lobby, and someone's greeting you and essentially gives you a menu of choices. And we all knew that we were going to do 2 different sessions, which I think we'll go in a little bit of depth of like differences between the two. So you really get questioned, like, what do you want to accomplish today? Or what do you think you need the most of today?
Mm-hmm.
And based on that, you get to choose from healing and Aspire and all kinds of different things. What's also unique that we haven't touched on yet is that in the meditation pod, each one is also associated with a color, a light color that also kind of rounds out the experience. So correct me if I'm not mistaken, in the meditation pod, there is no eye mask, but you are encouraged to close your eyes, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't close your eyes all the way or you open your eyes during it, you will see that light while going through the meditation, the music, whatever it is, right? So, you're great. Hey, I'm pick my thing. You walk in, you're in this amazingly dark lounge with like velvet
really
sofas.
dark, yes.
And my eyes didn't adjust at first. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I walk into the wrong room? Am I in some weird back room? Because no one else is in there. But then your eyes adjust and you realize like it's a very tranquil space, right? There's, I think even some like light fountains, incense. There's a variety of just like soothing things like warm water, teas, ginger chews. And it acts a little bit as a kind of, let's say, like get ready room, but also a debrief room because you can come out after. And I didn't notice this until after the fact, but Helen actually took out like a coloring book, an adult coloring book. So it was like another way to like decompress while either you were not ready to leave or maybe waiting for a friend. So once you were ready to go, they took you in and you basically go into what looks like a futuristic spaceship style dentist chair is what I'll call it.
Oh,
right?
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
Dentist chair.
It has like the angles you get in, but it also is fully encapsulated with like a little lid where the color will appear once you get started. But not to make it sound scary like a sci-fi thing, it is very plush and comfortable. And then what happens next is you get in your position, you get these covered earphones, and you get a weighted blanket. At this point in time, your session is being programmed, and you're going to start the 20-minute-ish session. And there's also longer versions, but we did 20 minutes. Interesting thing is that you get to choose a guided or non-guided meditation. And I didn't do the non-guided, but my assumption is that it's mostly like sounds, music, things that would tap into the wavelengths that would, activate the menu choice you picked. I'm trying to think what else there is. Well, okay, so you go in, you get your headphones on, the meditation's starting, and then the lid comes down. And Dan and I did talk about this, which is like, is this going to be some like scary coffin-like experience when the lid comes down?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It's very comfortable. In fact, you still see, your legs kind of in front of you outside of the pod. And there's 2 things that they tell you about. One is that while you're going through the experience, if you think of anything, come out of it and immediately write it down.
Mhm.
And I am not really that type of person that would normally be like, oh yeah, like all these things are going to come to my mind. But coming out of it, I did write a couple things down. They were just bullet points.
Yeah, what'd you write down?
One of the biggest things, and this sounds maybe kind of a little dorky, was just like, don't be afraid of risk. And, for
Not
me,
dorky at all.
well, I mean, it is very, I feel like, especially like a very good boy Asian American thing to say, right? Oh, don't be so risk averse. But, I think for me, and also, going into this experience, I was thinking a lot about, what are things in my life that are very stable? I'm comfortable with them. I've made choices of how to do things versus things that are more uncertain. And I think what I got a little bit out of that first session was like, hey, you have the ability to take some risks right now. Why not kind of lean into them a little bit? At a minimum, explore them more than you normally would, right? So that was one of the things. The second thing, which I really was kind of trying to fight, is that they tell you that a lot of people fall asleep in it and that it's okay. Now, maybe here's the frugal Asian American in me. I'm like, fall asleep. I just wasted paying for a session that I fell asleep to. But the reason why they say it's okay is because the sound and even the meditation happening while you're sleeping, your body unconsciously is still actually retaining it. And in fact, sleeping is a byproduct of feeling truly relaxed. And so actually for some people, that's almost insinuating that it's working. So I fought it hard. I'm like one of those people that's like, I'll never fall asleep. I hate taking naps. And of course, I did fall asleep.
You did?
I did. Only for like the last 1/3.
Okay, wow, okay.
But I came out and I was like,
last 1/3, that's a lot.
Yeah,
30%.
Like 6 minutes, guys. Come on.
7 minutes?
Could you tell if your brain was still moving though? Or like when you woke up, you're
how
like,
did you know that you-
could you still, like when you woke up, you were like, oh, I'm still like, I know where I'm at? Or like you had like in the instant thoughts?
I will say this. I didn't really think about it in the moment, but when I got out and started writing things down, I was like, wow, even though I just took a nap, I kind of feel less sleepy than a normal just like daytime nap, And, maybe that speaks to that my brain was activated in a different way.
I think they mentioned that it's very similar to like being hypnotized, and it's like the same hypnosis process that like when you are fully hypnotized, the people that are able to like let their brains get there, that like it's maybe a similar thing where like your brain's awake, but you're like technically like kind of asleep. And then the second thing is that like I think that it's all supposed to, if you did let your brain get there, that one of the notes they mentioned was that even this, like you mentioned that like it seemed silly, it was like, oh, just take risks, like the just with first thing that you came up with, that a lot of people might write something down and that maybe they need to do 10 more sessions before they're like, oh, all of these things connect. But like it is the first thing that you think of that eventually apparently it's supposed to turn into something, maybe if you're like doing it correctly. So
that's cool.
That's why I thought that they said that like just write down the first thing, doesn't matter what it is. And then like maybe if you have the ability to be able to do it more often, that like maybe in 2 months look back at what you've written and like maybe it'll all like come together.
Is that something that you had been telling yourself before the meditation pod, that you should be taking more risks, especially with like you mentioned career change and all of that? Is that something that was already on top of your mind?
I think so. And I think I've been talking to friends about it. But the fact that it quickly jumped out so fast, it maybe was just like a little bit of a booster, or maybe I had a moment of clarity to say like, hey, this is important. Why not? You talked about it. Don't fight it. You know? Yeah.
Do you remember the actual guided meditation itself? Because we all did the same one, right? We were all in healing mode. So we heard the same meditation, which I don't know if you remember it, but the first part was about this concept of returning home, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of it, I was just like, am I thinking this? Am I falling asleep and just imagining things? But the concept of returning home. And then the second was going to a castle.
Yes.
Yes?
I do remember that,
Okay,
actually.
that makes me really happy.
Okay.
I swear I made that up afterwards and talked to no one about it. But it was a glass castle.
A glass castle.
I'm not sure if I remember the glass
on a
part.
hill.
That sounds familiar.
I do remember the hill
Okay.
and the castle.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the way that these guided meditations works is that it is sort of like a visualization. Like you hear what you want to, what you hear, and you visualize what you want to see. So everyone's visual is going to be very different.
Yeah.
But yeah, how did that? So the concept of home and then this castle, how did that translate to taking more risks?
Maybe in a way, it's even how you visualize what home or the castle is. And, you're influenced by things that you've seen in your life, right? So maybe there's like a illustrative castle, like a cartoon. And you're like, oh, I always see it that way. But maybe in a way you're like, but that's not the castle I want to see, And then you start thinking about other versions of what it could be. And that could be maybe what unlocked for me. Like, don't don't go by the template. Maybe that was the castle or the home that you always thought of for all those years. You can build a new one for yourself too.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I did fall asleep, so there was a moment of the rest of my mind and body taking over and me not fighting it. That's maybe how I interpret it.
Okay.
I think that my critical feedback to that really quick is that, like, not to take anything away from what you saw and how you interpreted, but that I think that that's true. But the other thing that's true is that they probably, and this is just to get maybe a little bit more manipulative-y, but like, I'm sure that there's certain words or certain things that like they've tested over the years. They're like, oh, talking about this in this way brings out certain memories or like helps people. And so it's less about the idea that like glass maybe doesn't mean anything and you create whatever meaning you need to from like glass or the word castle, but it's like you're entering something and that like you're in that space. And so they're using that as a way to like get you there.
Yeah. I actually did feel that a lot with the concept of returning home because I feel like for me with like grief, I do find myself returning to this like childlike state where a lot of my dreams are also about my childhood home or my childhood bedroom or me just being a young girl. And so when I'm going through these periods of just like uncertainty or just confusion, whatever it is, I do feel like I've returned to this concept of home. So even them bringing it up during a meditation that is supposed to be about healing, you're right. They were manipulating me.
Have those
or
thoughts
making it work? Yes.
Have those thoughts come out like maybe not necessarily in like this space, but like have you done like yoga with Janet another time? Like your mind will like kind of go to those things too?
Not outside of meditation. Usually no. Yeah.
But I did notice dreams, like you went home to Boston recently, right?
I did. So I do wonder, maybe because I think I booked the trip perhaps afterwards. It was pretty recent. But I think going home was in large part to just be around family. Yeah.
Wedding season is upon us. How many of you are attending a wedding this year? How many of you are in weddings this year? If so, you're probably in the market for some great shapewear. Let me tell you about today's sponsor, Honeylove. They have revolutionized compression technology so you will not feel like you are suffocating while wearing effective shapewear. Honeylove shapewear features lingerie-inspired design details that are super cute that you'll want to show off, but it's also made with breathable fabric that keeps you nice and cool, which is perfect for the hot days of summertime. For a limited time only, you can get Honeylove on sale. Get 20% off your entire order with our exclusive link, honeylove.com/ABG. Their best-selling Superpower short smooths, shapes, and lifts, giving you a flawless silhouette under any outfit. Honeylove's greatness is not just in the wear of their items, though. It is also in the removal. Ladies, we have all been there, struggling to take off a tight piece of shapewear with the bathroom line out the door. The Superpower short has a 100% cotton gusset so you can skip the extra undies, plus it has a convenient opening in the panty area for a super easy bathroom experience. Who would not love that, right? Genius. Treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save 20% off at honeylove.com/ABG. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off, honeylove.com/ABG. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. The summer vibes are just getting started, honeys. Shape your life with Honeylove. Did you have anything that you wrote down right after you came out of?
I wrote down the concept of home and how I think it solidified that family does mean a lot to me. Going into the castle, I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to be alone in here.
Oh, that's telling too, though, right?
I think so, yeah. Because looking around, there was no one there. There was just some pillows.
Some pillows?
At least there are pillows.
You didn't have pillows?
Mine didn't have pillows. Man, what a sad castle for me.
I like sat on a pillow and I was just by myself. And that made me really sad. And I realized I don't care about the castle if I'm by myself and I'm alone sitting on pillows. And I also wanted a clean home. I remember thinking that too. I was like, if it's a big house, it better be clean. I don't know where this is going.
Wait, what does your castle look like? Janet, what's
I
your
didn't
castle
have
look
a
like?
castle. I did
What did they have you enter?
I think I went into a forest. I actually don't remember the exact.
Did your forest have pillows?
My forest did not have
Did you aspire to get out of the forest?
I was trying to run away from. No, I actually don't even like remember the storyline. I think it was like nature and forest. And I remember hearing kind of like waterfall type of sounds, maybe some like animal insect noises. But the thing that I wrote when I got out of there, and I was actually fighting because I know that sometimes when they're telling you like, oh, you should write down the first thing that comes to your head, then I'm like, oh, I'm going to be sitting in there walking through the meditation only thinking about what am I going to write? What is the thing that I'm... So I almost told myself like, don't write anything down just so you can like not. But when I came out of that pod, I was like, no, I'm just going to do it, right? And just kind of force myself. And I couldn't even get out like a phrase really, but I wrote down a word and the word was receive. So that was, I think for me, maybe in my phase right now where I feel like there's just like so much that I could be doing or not really certain, like I'm reminded that usually in periods of my life when I go through change, the getting my footing again doesn't come from me pushing and seeking things. It usually comes from me being open and receiving to whatever is going to happen or come to me naturally. So I think that was maybe just a reminder I needed for myself to be open and receive things and not feel like you have to be like pushing yourself to find them.
That's cool.
I love that.
Did you write anything down, Dan?
Nope. But I was also like you, where I knew that if I had that on my mind, it might have just like gone away from me. And then the other thing that I know about myself and like things like this are that I have it's like when I've been in some therapy sessions, they'll be like, write down how you feel right now, or like write down what you would say to your childhood self. And I'd be like, I can't do this right. Like I'm like 2 in my head. This isn't going to happen. It's good for like, I acknowledge that this process is really important and that there is something that does come to your mind. But I think that like, and I'm not saying it can't happen eventually, but I do think that like, it would take a couple of sessions for me to like, I think be in the right space. And so I think maybe it would happen, but maybe I would need to do it at least like 4 more times.
Yeah.
I think Dan brings up a couple good points though from even what he said before. First, there is an intersection of just experimenting what works over time, and then has led to like clinical studies or scientific research around the connection of meditation, certain breathing exercises, and such. And so, for each of these sessions, and I know we only did 2 for this first one, there could be things that really work for some people and don't work for others, right?
Yeah.
And the other part, which we did hear a story about from the owner, was that there's certain people where when they find the one session that really resonates with them, they just go back and do that same one over and over again, right? So kind of each of our experiences naturally could be different. And then maybe if we went over time and like tried them all or did one over and over again, maybe we'd find a greater depth out of it too. So yeah, I mean, I think these first impressions are very interesting. And at the same time, it's like, oh, maybe there is more to experience too.
Yeah. What do you feel were some of the challenges that you faced while going through the meditation? Other than falling asleep. For Tim.
That doesn't sound like a challenge. That like really sounds like you completed the mission.
A wonderful gift.
Yeah.
I think for me as an ex-engineer, I'm very scientifically kind of like anchored. I like process. Like this is really, back in the day, but remember when you do like math proofs? You go like step A to step B.
Yeah.
Like that's how I think. And so in my mind, as I'm getting into the sci-fi dentist chair, I'm already analyzing everything. Why is this light this way? Why is the sound thing here? Oh, it looks like a cartridge. Oh, where'd this come from? From like overseas? Did she program it herself?
Wow,
and so I'm almost like over analyzing everything. And then I finally will let myself like experience it. Right. So I think I had to get over that to then really let go. And that's probably why like I don't do traditional meditation with like eyes closed and such. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but like for me, a walk with music with no words is equally meditative for me. But to sit in a pod and be still and do all these things that I'm not used to was like, okay, I gotta like get over my own assumptions to finally let go.
Yeah.
Are you able to get to that place in like other, like when you go for runs or like if you're driving? I know for like some people, like that puts you into a really good headspace where like you kind of just like zone out while you're driving and then like you're in your place. You're like, oh, I had all these thoughts when I got here.
Yeah. So, look.
And you know how your car was made. So you're not thinking about like, what are the mechanics of my vehicle?
Gasoline into the engine. Yes. Actually, I used to commute to work about 45 minutes each way. And now I work at a remote company or just have more flexibility in my schedule. And so I don't have that driving time. But that driving time was kind of a version of a meditation. If it was music or even like listening to a podcast, even though I'm like retaining the information, I'm not like an active listener writing things down, right? So it was kind of like relaxing in its own way. So yeah, I think finding those other activities, now that like, let's say how I live has changed a little bit, I've implemented other things. So
how about for you, Dan? Are you a meditator?
I'm not, but I am a big advocate for like the people that can do it. Amazing. But I do think that like my version of meditating is, at least at this point, has been being able to just like do breathing exercises, or like even when I was getting ready for the podcast, I had like, again, I was telling these people earlier, I had a very difficult day, but like I knew that in order to be able to be in like a good mind space for this, that I just need to take a step back. I know where my moment is, where I can just like, I can sit back, I breathe, I put my arms up. And then like usually like I think this motion actually helps me the most.
Oh.
And
Make
so
sure I shaved.
yeah. But like doing maybe that's why I wear the jacket. But doing this specifically and then like big breath. Like if I do that like 10 times, it's not like full meditation, but like it helps extremely.
Well, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
That breathing technique.
I'm probably just making. I'm like
It's
definitely not a thing. I feel like that I learned it from Janet actually. So
What? I've never seen Janet do this. Do you
You're watching me do it now.
Yeah. But like you just figured that out for your own body. You're like, oh, this works for me.
after I thought that Janet did it.
Okay.
Well, I think breath work and physical movement a lot. Like it's anything that you can do to kind of like break if you're like overthinking.
Yeah.
Or if you're, I think mostly that's usually like for physical stuff, it's like getting out of your own head if you're overthinking and if it's like trying to get to a more calm, present state. That
Or
helps,
just stretching. Like I think just moving. Like I think it's the stretching part. Like maybe that's what helps.
Yeah.
We were just doing box breathing before this.
Yeah.
We started recording, which I learned that like Navy SEALs and a lot of athletes do to like rest their minds and focus. So
It's a very,
we're
very
rested and
good
focused
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Especially after this. I'm not gonna put my arms.
Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as the first rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Even if you're still rocking the old school rent check vibes, Built Rewards has got your back. They will mail the check for you. It's like having a personal rent-paying assistant. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. Or use your points to sweat it out. Redeem your points to book fitness studio classes. You can also use your points toward a future rent payment or toward a future down payment on a home. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built Points has been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent now when you go to joinbuilt.com/ABG. That's JOINBILT.com/ABG. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/ABG to start earning points with your rent payments today.
Okay, so Tim walked us through the first part, which was the meditation dome, and then we did the vibro thing.
Vibro
lounge. Yeah, lounger. Tim.
Help
resident storyteller here.
Share what that was.
How about someone else?
Actually, yeah, Dan, tell us what that was like.
I'm going to do the opposite of what Tim just
I
did.
also love Dan's storytelling.
So for this one, let me tell you what. It was so basically what they do is you move over from the first session and then you go over to the second session. It's one long chair. And then for this one, you put on an eye mask. And so it's very similar where you're listening to, at least for me, it was a guided meditation. So it was another one. But I think that maybe because of the eye mask and that you're completely blacked out, that the blacking out maybe has something to do that makes you think differently than the colors and the other sounds. And for this one, at least the one that I did was, I think that I wanted to do creativity, but I think I got something else. There was another, again, you pick from different sessions. And then for mine, what I remember very specifically was the meditation for this one was all about like taking steps down a path and that you're just like walking down and then they just keep on like talking about like walking down something. That's from what I remember. And I think that actually I got more out of this session than the other one because I do think that I think just having blackout was important for me. And then also you have a blanket on, like you're kind of like positioned differently, so maybe it helps your mind think. And then I think it was the walking or like the way that this person was talking that helped me get out of my mind a little bit more. So that was helpful. Very similar to the first one though. I don't think that like actually tangibly, it wasn't like we did a different thing where instead of like sleeping or like being down, you're in a Dracula thing or like a like there wasn't like another, you're basically like you're sitting but just sitting differently. And then meditation, you're there for maybe a little bit different amount of time. And then the eye mask. So I think that was extremely helpful for me for the second one.
So you felt like you got more out of it because there was more of the like sensory deprivation, I think, right? Like,
Yeah,
you take
maybe
away
maybe
what-
I am really into that. I thought I would hate like sensory deprivation.
Yeah, you were
But,
really
like, maybe
nervous
that's
about
actually-
the pod. You're like, oh, if it's too enclosed, just like no like small spaces.
Yeah,
but maybe
or like
it's-
just total blackness. I thought was going
Yeah.
to freak me out, but
Wow, look
is
at
that right?
us
Is that
learning
is
new
that
things
what it
about
was?
ourselves.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is that there were vibrations that went through the
Oh,
chair
that's
I didn't feel
that
that.
were they're very light, but they were supposed to be programmed with the meditation or
storyline or
the music.
Oh.
They needed to up that by like 100.
just in the chair,
like little ants like
Yeah.
crawling on you.
Or maybe that's what helped me. Like maybe because I didn't
Mm.
notice it. Like maybe that's actually what helped me. Like
get into
Yeah.
the
like be
state.
better at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think the deprivation of like putting the eye mask on, it forces you to close off your eyes. And then also the blanket. There's a thing where they say if you feel like you're in the womb, like you're being embraced, like weighted blankets, you might actually enter a state of relaxation more easily. And I remember they also offered you a pillow underneath your legs, so you kind of elevated. And maybe then it's like, because in the pod where you're sitting is like the dentist chair, it's like this, right?
Yeah.
But then if you're elevated and you're kind of almost more in like fetal position, maybe there's something about that that also helps you feel like a little bit more safe.
I was
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
more comfortable
Yeah.
with the second one. And that's when
Same.
I fell asleep.
Oh, so
I
you
agree
did
with
fall
Tim. I
asleep
was
with that.
so like, I'm gonna get my money out of this one. It's the first one, and then second one's like, I will too. But then they kind of prompted at the beginning, like, you should fall asleep or something like that. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I will. And then eventually I fell asleep. And I think one of the best feelings was just waking up, because they eventually tell you like, you are now having to wake up or something like come out of this meditation. And then when I heard that, I was kind of like, I felt this full body anxious like franticness, because it kind of perhaps like the mom mode in me just turned on, and I thought my son needed me, because that's how like life is as a parent, you know, like
yeah.
you can't snooze your child. So
Yeah.
anytime I hear something that I have to wake up, I do wake up like, okay, and now I have to wake up. I cannot snooze a child. I cannot snooze him. I just got to get up. And so realizing that I was in this comfortable pod lounge situation with a weighted blanket, I was like, oh, this is so nice. And I was in complete relaxation for the second one.
Did you wake up when they said that, or were you already awake and then you heard it?
I think I was starting to wake up when
You
they
wake up
said it.
naturally.
Yeah,
Mm.
I did. Yeah. But I think the second one just felt more relaxed. And the first one was more about accessing core memories for me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I feel like the second one, I remember there was this, I think they stated, your body is asleep, but your mind is still awake. And I remember deliberately feeling like, oh yeah, like my body feels totally relaxed, but I'm still like, I'm able to hear you and process what you're saying. And then I was kind of like, is this what it's like to be hypnotized? Like, am I
Ooh,
hypnotized right
yeah.
now?
Tim, how did you feel with the second one? You fell asleep?
Two
Yeah.
parts. Okay, 2 parts. Yes. First,
1 minute in.
I do think that the position and the setup is more comfortable.
Yeah.
And like I immediately felt like I was going into nap mode. But similar to the first session, I'm like, I need to listen to this, stay awake. And I did creativity, actually, the one that you were talking about before.
What did we do, Janet?
Did one of you do creativity
I
as well?
think we did creativity too.
Okay.
I think we all did creativity.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think it spurred creativity for me, but I was extremely relaxed. Right. And so I think I did fall asleep again for a little bit. but it felt much more, I did feel more relaxed in the second one than the first. And not to say the first one was not good, but it felt different coming out.
Yeah. You're also getting into the mindset, like coming from LA traffic and going to the first one, and so all of a sudden you're like, I gotta be relaxed. It's pretty impossible to do. And then the second one, I think, is when you fully feel immersed in the experience.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we talk a lot amongst ourselves, myself, Janet, and Mel, about mental health and therapy, and we're pretty open about that with our listeners as well. But one thing that we've noticed is that, especially with Asian men, there is a higher level of stigma and sensitivity around mental health. Dan, I know more recently you have been so much more open about therapy with your followers on social media, Dan, aka Dan. And I think that is really commendable. Like, I love following your journey and also hearing about it as a friend. What do you think prompted you to start really focusing on your mental well-being? And especially with your birthday too. You had a lot of goals with your own mental journey or well-being that you shared with us too.
I've got opinions about both of those things. One about just Asian men and the idea of therapy or mental health. So I'll get to that in a second. And then, but from my own beginnings of being able to talk about it, I think that a lot of that just deeply has to do with as I'm an adoptee. I think maybe your listeners are aware that I'm a Korean adoptee. And I do think that when you're put into a position where you're naturally different from your environment, not only are you not in your country of origin, you're not with your family of origin, and you're not around people that look like you or like are supposed to think like you, at least from like what you see in society. And I think because of that, it makes you really, really self-aware of like your environment and the pressures of the realities of the things that are around you. And that I think that those are the things that naturally, as an infant or as a baby or as you're growing up, that like usually those things are taken care of, and that you've got structure and you've got things around you like a nice warm blanket of things that like prevent you from having to like deal with these other impounding issues that maybe somebody else might not be thinking about. And I do think that like because I wasn't protected from those things, that and a lot of adoptees and a lot of other people, not just necessarily adoptees, if you're put into a bad situation as you're growing up, or like if things happen to you, it takes away layers of security from the way that you think. And I think that because I didn't have those layers of security, it made me hyper aware of just my environment and the way that I think. And that because of that, it provides a lot of anxiety around just being a human. And I think that especially anxiety, like I read about anxiety so often. I think the biggest thing that I take away from like just the word anxiety or like what it's supposed to do is this feeling of impending doom, that whether it's like danger, that I think as an infant, again, like I was just constantly in fear of like, oh, I'm not going to have my biological mom. Like I have nothing around me. And you're always in danger as a baby. And then even when you're put into a situation where like now you're with people that are supposed to take care of you. And I had a very wonderful upbringing. I got very lucky with that. But they're just like, there's so many other forms of like danger that are still there. Is my family going to keep me? Are the like all of these other thoughts that come into your mind. And so you're constantly putting up barriers around yourself that are supposed to be there to protect yourself. And a lot of that is you don't realize it until much later on. And for me, I think that I started really feeling it like as you get into high school, college, you're like, why am I the way that I am? Why do I always feel this constant like feeling of anxiety? And it's so silly because I really like when I think about when I was in my 20s or when I was younger and I already felt it and I kind of knew about this stuff. It wasn't until I like, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago that like I was like, oh yeah, like that's probably why. But if those reasons were always there. And I think that for me, what's been helpful are two things. The biggest thing is music. I also do music. And I think that like talking about the things that are in my brain have been really helpful. And that even though I didn't start therapy younger when I should have started therapy, you get it when you get it. You start therapy when you need to start therapy. But for me, I think that when I did do performances or shows, being able to be very vocal about the way that I felt with these people that didn't know me was kind of like being in therapy. And you're able to get all of these things off of your brain. And so with me realizing it or not, I was able to like get it out of my system. But if I didn't have that outlet, it'd probably build in me a lot more. And it maybe would come out in like really destructive ways. And so anyway, that's my story with that. And then I'm like actually very interested with like Tim, because you had a different upbringing. You have Asian parents. You grew up in I think around a lot of Asian people, or like in a similar environment as Phil, Bay Area, more Asian people maybe than I did. Yeah. But I know that it's strongly there. I don't know how to internalize it like for myself, because I do look at other Asian men and I know like, and there's some people around me that I applaud so much because they've been able to like find that within themselves, and they have done therapy. They're a lot more vocal, and you can see just how much it's like impacted them. But I understand too the people that I meet that haven't done it and that are very against it. And I empathize with that too, because they're coming from different perspectives as well. Anyway, so that's my spiel on those two things.
To all my wonderful parents and caregivers out there, let's talk about those unforgettable moments with your little ones. The first steps, the giggles, the boundless energy. But let's be real, with a growing and wild child, those moments can also mean unexpected messes, which is why I'm excited to share something that's been a lifesaver for us, Pampers Cruisers 360. Pampers Cruisers 360 is the must-have baby-proof diaper. These slide on like a pair of pants, unlike ordinary diapers with tabs or tapes that your escape artist can rip off. And trust me, thanks to its 360-degree stretchy waistband, it can help save you from some serious messes and keep your baby comfy. With up to 100% leak-proof protection, you can let your little one explore and play. And when it's time for a change, it's as easy as ripping the sides, rolling it up with a disposable tape on the back, and you're done. Simple as that. Try Pampers Cruisers 360 with the new Pampers Free and Gentle wipes for healthy baby skin. They're made from 100% plant-based cloth that grips the mess. With Free and Gentle, mess meets its match. Let your little one live wild and mess-free because every adventure should end in smiles, not cleanups. For trusted protection, trust Pampers, the #1 pediatrician recommended brand.
Maybe building off it and sharing a little bit of my experience too. I think if I overgeneralize, because everyone's journey is different, but I think Asian American men are taught kind of two things from immigrant parents. One is like work hard, let your accomplishments be kind of like your voice, right? You do good things, you get recognized for it, you make it through life. The second part is that talking about things that are more emotional, that are open up vulnerability, make you look weak. And as a result of it, you're not going to be successful. And those two things have like some intersection as well. And so I think in many ways for myself, whether I was happy or upset or whatever, it was like, don't show your cards, right? You can show your family, maybe your close friends, but don't put it out there in the public. And I think you carry that all the way to now you're starting your career as an adult and you're in the workforce. And there is a little bit of a stigma or thought of like, you don't show your weakness at work. So it just perpetuates that same thinking all the way to when you get married, when you start building adult friendships or fostering long-term friendships into adult friendships. And I think, for me, the big breakthrough moment was just realizing that, hey, by not talking about what was going on in my life, especially with my other male friends, that was very limiting to our friendship, right? And so I'm very grateful that I had friends who were accepting of me, like wanting to share about myself, things that I was doing well in, things that I were upset about, whatever it may be, but also being receptive to me asking them to share the same back. And in many ways, a lot of our closer friends, even in LA, I think we've become closer in the last several years as we're in that 30s range, going into our 40s, because we're able to talk about those things. But, it doesn't happen for everyone. And sometimes you don't even know how to get started. And I think that's where therapy might be the first venue, the first opportunity to do so. And people go to therapy for all kinds of reasons, many of times, which will also be family. So imagine I just said, hey, you're supposed to put on a happy face, not talk to anyone, but maybe you can tell your family. In many cases, your family is not receptive to it either, or your family is the thing giving you anxiety or stress, and you're still working through that. So, I think that is how I think in a very general way, the Asian American kind of mental health experience is as a foundation.
Yeah. I guess for the both of you, like when was that breakthrough moment for you, Tim, to say like, oh, I'm actually going to talk to my male friends about how I'm feeling, to understand how they're feeling, to generate more conversation around mental health amongst just friends. And then for Dan, like at what point were you like, music is no longer serving me for what I need in order to quell the anxiety that I have inside of me. So I have to seek therapy. Like, what were those moments for the two of you to kind of like get to that next step?
Yeah. I think I had like different chapters in my life that unlocked more capability of doing this, right? So the first was I actually grew up with a very autistic sister, very severe on the spectrum, to the point where, she had to have a caretaker with her at all times. But kudos to my parents. They taught me very early that, she's not going to be able to communicate with you directly, but you're going to see by her body language or by the few words that she uses, the things that you need to do to take care of her as a good brother, right? And so I think over many years of development, it taught me to be a little more empathetic than probably my normal baseline would have been. So that's the first part. The second part was facing, family members passing away. My parents are luckily both survivors of cancer, and that happened in different parts of my life too. And so I think when you're faced with something that's so close to home and potentially losing someone, you realize truly like life is short, right? And if you're harboring things, feelings, not allowing yourself to really kind of be your full self, that is something like a traumatic event can kind of unlock that. Sometimes good and also sometimes for bad, right?
Yeah.
I also think then the last part for me is just like organically seeing someone else truly open up allows me to then be even more open with them, right? And so that has just come a little more organically over time. But I think something that as I try to learn from my past and get to like where I am today, I very much deliberately want to make sure I'm keeping myself accountable to ask and share with other people that I consider my friends. Something I often say is that if you don't ever have a one-on-one coffee, meal, hang out with someone, you'll never really know them. You might have a lot of fun together, but you won't really know them. And especially for like two men having a meal together and hopefully like talking into some more depth, I think then you start to unlock that connection, and then maybe you are able to like be there for each other. So those are kind of the ways I think about it. It's a progressive thing for me. It was never like a one moment in life thing.
Yeah.
Was it because when you moved to LA, you were more deliberate about making one-on-one time with people, right? Do you think that was when there was a turning point and being able to get deeper with guy friends?
Actually, Janet, thanks for reminding me. I moved here right as COVID started to like, the COVID world started to unlock, right? People had vaccines, stores opened up again, people could do more social things. That COVID year in San Francisco, when I was still living in the Bay Area, that was very revealing to me on like, who did I actually know well, right? Who did I actually share in depth about myself? What friendships became stronger? What friendships didn't really even survive because we didn't talk at all in that whole year plus? And so when I moved to LA, I was lucky enough to know some people already, but I felt that I wanted to keep kind of that mindset going of establishing friendships that were real so that I wouldn't waste someone else's time and they wouldn't waste my time. If we didn't actually get into like what's actually going on with you day by day, what's really on your mind, what are the things that make you extremely happy and joyful, and I want to help foster those things versus the things that trouble you, can I be a support for you on that? And so, I mean, I think that, I think the question going back to like, was there a moment? I would have never wanted COVID to happen again, but it was kind of a good pivotal moment for me as an adult, I think, thinking about friendships.
Have you been able to, Tim is like such an empathetic guy, and that like,
He's
they're
a golden
really
retriever. That's his primal astrology. He's a golden retriever.
I am a golden retriever, it's true.
Yes.
And like, obviously a lot of challenges in your life. And like, there's a lot of things that like just even hearing you dictate what it was that you've gone through and the circumstances around you have turned you into the person you are. And people that obviously live in like different places grow up with other environments where like maybe they have to be a lot more hardened by their environment, or they don't have somebody that's maybe going through something difficult. They just have really difficult parents, and there's like, we have to work to survive. I'm curious, because I think it comes out when I talk to other people, maybe it's different from my perspective, but with like your Asian male friends that are like maybe again similar socioeconomic like location, place. Have you had conversations about them, like the guys that maybe are a little bit more hardened, or like have you tried to like dig in with them, and have they been open to it, and or do they largely think that like, or like, oh yeah, this is happening, it's a good thing?
Yeah.
Have their attitudes changed?
Yeah, I think you definitely get the variety, the spectrum. I think for some men, they'll even just be surprised that this conversation is happening at all because they've never been approached with that opportunity. So it's like, oh, wow, you actually like want to know what are my struggles, and we're going to spend time on this. And you're not looking at me as now this like weaker individual. Even just that, like those brief kind of components, they've never had that opportunity. And it's not because of me. It's just merely because I was there and I was kind of okay talking about it, right? So that you get people like that, or I've had experiences like that. I think for others, it's still really hard. And maybe we won't get into that depth of conversation, but at least I get the feeling that they're just happy that someone has asked them. And then my hope from there is, hey, maybe they will find the right friend to talk to, or they will get access to therapy. And through therapy, they'll get to talk about these things. I don't. Sometimes I think I don't also know until like even years later, where someone will come to me and be like, hey, like I'm doing really well. Maybe here's what's going on in my life. And by the way, that one conversation we had like really helped me because maybe it was the first time I got to talk about that one topic, or just the fact that it felt like someone cared about me beyond the surface, And again, I don't say that has happened for me too. This is not just about like me helping others. I have tried to be very strong, kind of like put on a good face, professional face, and someone will catch me at the right time and ask me a question, and then like, boom, I'll like totally unlock. I know we're gonna talk about this a little bit later, but I have actually not done therapy, but I am actually looking into it for a number of reasons. And I think as much as I take the compliment of like, I'm an empathetic person, I think there's a lot of things that I still wear a mask for because I want to be very put together for other people, And I think for a number of reasons, it would be really good to talk to someone who doesn't know me, because that'll remove that layer completely as well. Yeah.
And I wanted to see if you're going to bring that up during this, because I was very curious about that you seem like somebody that, again, you're aware that it's going to be helpful to you, and that you seem like somebody that would be very open to like trying it. And it was a little surprising for me that you hadn't tried it yet, or that it wasn't something that now that we just have dug into it, that like, even with you telling us that you want to try it, there was still like some kind of little apprehension that I'd felt from you of like, I don't know if I really want to do this. Dan, tell me more about your experience. Maybe I may or may not do it. And I was like, oh no, Tim like definitely's done therapy. Or like Tim's, again, like in the best possible way, just because again, you're like, you seem to know yourself so well. So I was surprised by that. And I think that it's, for whatever the little apprehension is there, that like, I think that's a good example though, that like, there's a lot of like Asian men that like seem like really capable, well-adjusted people. And you are, but that still need help with these things. And I think that sometimes people in our lives seem very well-adjusted, or they feel like, oh no, I'm good, life's good, society, like family's good. And that it still is helpful for those people. Cause I think that it takes them to whatever that next level is. So,
yeah. I no matter how much mental health has definitely risen up into the public eye as a topic we should be talking about, it's still one of the most stigmatized things that we face, especially in the US, I think. Actually, no, I mean, worldwide, I think there's all kinds of unique factors, but in the US, like, at least I can like, empathize with it. I was definitely one of those people that always thought, hey, I didn't need therapy. I have great friends. I have a good relationship with my family. That can act as my therapy. It was only in the last several years that I got to learn from other people's experiences of them talking about their own journey, right? How they got started, why they went. They may not give me the deep ins and outs of what they talk about during therapy, but I see the next steps that come out for them, right? If we break it down even more, like there's different types of therapy too. There are ones that are very structured. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for example, is very like curriculum driven. Versus there's more, this is the wrong term, but like freeform therapy, where it's like you more just have a place to go talk about things. And again, it's with someone who's like not in your social circle. They won't judge you. And, I think also therapy gets a little bit of a bad rep of like, you have to go if you have these like deep rooted problems. It is also just a place to put your thoughts, right? And for some, religion can be a place to put your thoughts. For some, being still can be a way for them to like put their thoughts somewhere separate from the day. But for others, it is talking to someone and just feeling like they're heard that can really go a long way. So all these things I'm describing, like I learned really in the last 3 to 4 years. And in fact, I actually ended up working at a digital mental health company called Calm.
Calm.com.
And and I learned a lot there when you're seeking it yourself, but also professionally on like what's been studied, what has made it to the market, how do people use self-care tools with therapy, with clinical intervention sometimes. And that has opened up my eyes a lot too. But I think the biggest thing is that therapy has people have this vision of what therapy is supposed to be. And it can really be so many things. I'm very grateful for all the friends that were willing to share, because that's also something you are not required to share. But that helped me unlock this kind of journey to say like, hey, it might be worth looking into. I also say like, I'm dating someone, and they also encouraged me to look into it because they got a lot out of it, not just relationship-wise in terms of romantic relationship, but also like family, friends, outlook on life. And I think that was also like another great supporter to say like, hey, this has worked for me in different ways.
I'm excited to see what Tim 2.0 is going to be like post-therapy, honestly. Because I feel like Dan was saying, you are someone who is incredibly well-adjusted and doesn't seem like someone who needs therapy. But at the same time, what does that even mean, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone can benefit from therapy. And so even you knowing, certain things about yourself, you're like, this is the things that I want to work on. And I'm just excited for you to be on that journey.
Oh, thanks. Me too. If I can add one thing, I know we have other things to talk about too, but you'd be surprised by how many people that have tried therapy or are in therapy. And so if you're at all interested in it, try to be courageous and ask.
Yeah.
And I know I just said it was a very stigmatized thing, but you'd be really surprised that someone you're close to probably is or has done it. And that can be that, encyclopedia to like get you over that first step of really trying to pursue it. So
I also want to say like a lot of how I came into therapy in different phases, because like I've done it earlier and then in different phases of my life I returned to it. Sometimes I would return to it not because I needed to, but because I was looking to improve myself. So for a lot of communities that are people who are into like self-development and like even like the biohacking, or people you're just trying to become a better person, right? And become more like self-evolved. Therapy is like a really good tool for that. And so we say Tim 2.0 might not be anything that you're solving. It's more, maybe you have a more better understanding of certain aspects of yourself.
Taking more risks.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
For Dan, I feel like this year you are so much more intentional about your mental well-being. Like even for your birthday, you're like, these are the 6 things that I want to accomplish this year. And I thought that was fascinating that you're doing a lot of like inner work. Why do you think you've decided like this is the year that I'm going to do that? And what do you also hope to get out of it?
So I want to come back in a little bit because I'm also interested in just from the male perspective on like why do therapy, why not do therapy. I'm interested from like the female perspective that not necessarily have you guys done therapy, because I know that you guys have were more actively involved in that, but I'm sure that you guys have talked to like other male Asian friends that aren't necessarily in the community, and I'd be very curious about some of the people that aren't necessarily around a lot of these conversations a lot of times and whether or not they're open to it. Because I do think with what Tim had mentioned, his partner, the person that he's currently seeing, had brought it up, and that I think that maybe it's sometimes easier when you hear it from the opposite gender or like somebody that you're like in a relationship with. And so I'm like very curious because I know that there's a lot of Asian men that are in our lives that are maybe very apprehensive or that we're just around that have very hardened minds towards stuff like that, or just don't have the opportunity to do it. And so I'm kind of curious like what their opinions are, because you only know what you know. And I'm around people like Tim that are just great all the time.
I will say, as someone in like, the dating world, I haven't been on apps and I haven't redated or after like my major breakup, but I think during a lot of the conversations around looking for a partner, especially as a woman for a guy, you want the guy to be in touch with his feelings and like kind of having done self-work. So it is actually something that I think is attractive for a lot of, I don't know for
in your profile.
Yeah. You're looking for someone, I mean, that is actually, I've heard in conversations among women, you're looking for someone who is like, maybe if it's like they have job stability, have this and blah, blah, blah. But like, have they gone to therapy is like a big thing that people look at as well. Like, have you explored yourself? Do you know yourself? Have you confronted things that are hard to confront? So I think from that perspective, from an Asian woman and looking at Asian guys, like doing therapy is hot.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, one of the friends I talked to that gave me the most like depth on their experience, she said if her next boyfriend doesn't go to therapy, it's not going to work.
It could be a deal breaker.
It is a must.
Red flag,
it is a must try. It is a must try.
They have to be open to trying it.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been in the dating scene for 15 plus years, so I can't tell you if I've had experience with it.
Not necessarily with a partner, but like but I'm sure that you talk to a lot of like people just in the community.
Sure, I will say, and I think Philip is open to sharing this too. Like he's been at therapy, but it didn't work for him. So I don't think it works for everyone. I think he probably also didn't find the right therapist, or he just couldn't get himself kind of like even with the meditation pods, getting into that like relaxed Zen mode of really wanting to. I mean, he shared, but he was just like, I'm not really getting much out of it. So I am his therapist.
Amazing, but that's also like a good point though too. That like therapy is really expensive and it's like difficult to find. And even with like finding if you have the opportunity, the ability to be able to do it, like it's even like difficult for the people with those direct ways to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Like even being able to like try to use like health insurance. Like if you don't have health insurance, you can't do it. And it's very expensive for good people. And that kind of relates to like when I first started doing it, or like why did I feel like that I needed to like maybe go down to that direction when music wasn't necessarily going to be a thing that could fulfill that, is that I think that I was always open to therapy, and I was always like, oh yeah, eventually I'm going to do it. And that eventually it's going to happen. And I've been saying eventually for like 20 years. And that there was a moment that I've also been learning a lot about recently where timing, it really is everything. And if you think that you're supposed to do this thing, you either do it or you don't. And if you don't do it, you have nobody to blame but yourself. But it's also like sometimes you just have to like just make the move and just do it. And so for me, it was like, I could probably keep on saying eventually for the next 20 years, but I had a couple of things that just made it a lot more easy for me to do. The biggest thing was that like, I was able to like get on health insurance, like the health insurance made it a lot easier. And then, so that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And so that's like a big difficulty for a lot of people. And then the second thing is just I found a little bit more space and time for myself. And it's really one of those things where I was reading something recently that really resonated with me, that like nobody cares about your time the most except for you. You could have friends around you, they're going to be like, oh, you should do that. And that might want it for you so much. But unless you really want it, you're never going to do it. Nobody cares about your own time but yourself. And if you don't do it for yourself, that it sometimes you think at the end, like in 20 years, I can be like, oh, it worked out. I didn't do therapy. It's fine. But maybe it would be really, really helpful. And that, and then also to be attached to that too. There's other forms of therapy. Like I had the music, but some people really enjoy, like it's very therapeutic to run and be in sports and being able to communicate with your, the friends on your teams and being in a team situation. That's therapeutic. And so there are other ways that people can get it. And I think that sometimes in our society that we hear about this one thing and we're on these extremes. It's like, it's either I do the talk therapy or there's no other types of therapy. And you just keep on getting affirmed that there's this one way to do it. And if you don't do it that way, then I'm effed. And it's so incorrect because there's so many, it's also not possible for everybody to do therapy. There's only so many therapists. And that it's not but that's one of those things where I also fully believe that like oftentimes in our world, it's a zero-sum game. There's 5 therapists, only 5 people can do therapy. And so nobody else can do therapy if I don't get to be the one to do therapy. That's not true for therapy. You can find, although there's a thin amount of like therapists out there, there's like so many other ways that you can probably get it out of your system. And that I think that really getting close to you guys and like just closer and just being more vocal with like just being more open to being like, this is important. Saying things out loud. That was one step towards being, okay, now I'm going to do this next thing. And what I really realized is that I also kind of agree with Phil or like other people, like, therapy really wasn't working for me. Like, and actually the last therapist I had didn't really work. I like did 4 or 5 sessions. I was like, I don't know if I got what I needed out of this, but it's also similar to call back to what we were talking about earlier with like just being in the pod and that you maybe need to do it 10 times before you get to whatever that realization was. And that with my first therapist, that's where it was so helpful. And that I realized that with the first therapist that I saw, after 1 or 2 sessions, I was like, okay, she's not giving me the feedback. I don't know what I'm not getting anything out of this. But eventually it got to a point where I felt more comfortable. I put in the reps to like know how to like communicate. And that around like near the last sessions that I was with her, it felt so good to just say these things. And that there were a couple of moments where I was like, oh, I'm so happy. It wasn't a moment where I was like, oh, I could call one of you guys immediately. And I was like so looking forward to therapy because I had this one thing that happened to me that like just put me in the worst mood. And I was like, I can't wait to talk to this person about it and just get it off my chest. And then I felt so much better afterwards. And so it doesn't need to be, some people think that like therapy is also for like, oh, it's something really awful happened to you when you're younger. That's why you need therapy. For me, sometimes it's just like in a non-therapeutic way, but like similar to therapy. Over the last 2 months, again, really, really dark time, I had this one moment where I was at my lowest and I was like, I'm not currently in therapy. I can't like go see somebody professionally, but I had somebody that I knew would understand what it was I was going to talk about. I was like, hey, you're not my therapist, but just let me say all these things out loud. I said it out loud. I felt so much better. So it doesn't need to be a person you pay. It could just be somebody that just knows you, that's going to understand the situation. You need to get these feelings out no matter what. You can't let this stuff build in. My last point on this is that like, I also recently have been dealing with a lot of like my upper body, my neck and my shoulders, and my back. Like, I don't know, like I'm constantly self-aware of my body posture when I'm on camera. And I have a feeling that like, even during this thing, I've been maybe more closed up or like just feeling like this. It affects your posture. It makes you like close in. And it's actually like physically been painful for me too. And then I went to like go get a deep tissue massage. It's so helpful to like get out but they told me that like after 20 years of like just letting the stress build in, like it's knots. And like, it's like, oh, these are like things that are like, it's calcifying itself within your body. And like, I'm like, now I have to go like do deep therapy, massages like once a month. And I have to like do, like, it's something that I didn't expect. And so
the
it really,
mind-body connection.
Yeah. So do it or it'll physically affect you too. So even if you think that like mentally, you're like, I can handle it mentally, it's going to eventually catch up with you one way or another. And to do it before it becomes too late.
Yeah. Wow. You heard the man. Wow. Huge advocates here for therapy and mental health. And I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm so happy to hear that both of you are, either in therapy, going to therapy, or just wanting to access this better version of ourselves. I think when we're older, when we're adults, we kind of feel like we are like at a place where this is it. But it's like, no, there's so many different versions of us that we can be, you know, and in order to access that, you do have to like really do the internal work.
If I can maybe just add something, because I think we dug pretty deep into therapy.
Yeah.
But I think there's like a more blanket message here too, which is like overall mental health can be addressed in many different ways. Therapy is one modality, and there may be a different purpose for why you choose therapy. There's also just literally what we were talking about earlier of just like doing simple breath work throughout the day to de-stress. There's definitely studies that show the connection between breath and all the different systems of your body. And one big takeaway that I always keep with me, because it's really easy, is if you just change your breathing pattern for 60 seconds, you'll immediately feel more relaxed from when you were a minute ago. And so people often think like, oh, to really fully relax, I need to do these like very thoughtful, deep meditations. And there's definitely a purpose for that, right? Honestly, get out of the situation, change your breathing pattern for 60 seconds, you'll immediately feel different. And over time, you'll find the things that work for you. Something that, I learned a lot from my time working at Calm was, the mental health journey is not a straight line. We all want this like beautiful, you see in the classroom, like you're on the road to recovery type thing. It's this crazy, swirly, weird pattern thing that you're going to always have ups and downs. The way that you mature on your mental health journey is that you figure out the tools that work for you when you start to get into those like tough spots. You figure out the things that make you feel even better when you're at your highest of highs so you can stay there longer. And as you mature in that journey, you become more confident in doing so. That's really what mental health is all about. So I just want to add that because I think Dan is so passionate about the topic and he's like done a lot of self-exploration. And I'm sure there are people listening that are like, I don't even know where to get started, right? So it just goes back to say like, don't be afraid. Like the smallest step is still a step, right? And when you get to a little bit more confidence, you do a little more due diligence, you'll find the things that you want to explore deeper. You'll get there, right? So thanks Dan for going into like, just like a really like, honestly, like very deep first person view of like your own exploration over months, years, whatever you, have gone through.
Yeah. And just to reaffirm what Tim just said, like it's really just, it's a net. It's if it helps you even just a little bit, it's still helping you. Just do like one little thing is still important. You don't need to be 100%. Just like every step is a step forward.
Yeah.
This conversation makes me so happy.
I know.
And I feel like it's nice because like as friends, we always sit around and talk to each other, but like for some reason we put a mic in front of us and we learn a lot more. Okay, one last question for the two of you. What are some tips that you have for people out there who are seeking their mental well-being journeys?
I have 7 things.
Oh, okay.
I came ready. I've got it on my phone, which is an anonymous phone. I'm not going to talk about the brand of the phone. Okay. Anyway, here are the 7 things, 7 tips. The number 1 is human interaction. I think that's been the biggest thing for me. People just need to be with other people. Yeah. If you're alone by yourself, for people that are just, you hear it all the time, social media, go out there and meet your friends, be around with just another person. So important. Go out. I think the biggest thing for human interaction too, go out and actually go order something from a cash register or a barista if you're getting coffee, like that. Even that like small interaction's helpful. Exercise, I think that just moving your body, walking around, taking walks, helpful. The breathing, we talked about that heavily. Listen, watch your favorite thing. I think that what's been really helpful for me is just finding something that like, I don't know what it is, but like Sabrina Carpenter, not necessarily the artist that I would naturally find myself listening to, but her songs are just like super upbeat and happy. And so it makes me happy. And then,
wow, learned something new today about Dan. Okay.
And then therapy, we just talked about that, talking out loud, writing. And then I think that my final thing is just say kind things to yourself like every day. And just like I noticed that it sounds so stupid to like look yourself in the mirror and be like, you're gonna do great today. Like you should feel proud about what you're doing. You're doing good because you're the only person that's gonna be able to like really believe it. And the more and more you tell yourself that, the better you're gonna feel. And that's been helpful. Feel silly, do it every 10 times, it's gonna feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Wow. I love. Can you also send that to us as a text every morning and do it to yourself? Just record yourself doing it.
Oh my gosh, we should all share our positive affirmations with each other in the group chat.
Oh wow.
That should be its own. Actually, you guys should do like an Instagram account just for positive. No, wait. Get positive affirmations, an Instagram account, and just have your users and like you guys just
Submit them
upload,
in.
submit positive. I think that would actually like be a
I love
really
that.
like great thing.
That's a great idea.
Ongoing
I would.
stories every.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
gonna be
Oh, yeah.
24
We're not doing
people
it. Someone out there,
phone
please
up.
do it.
I actually did prepare for this question, but Dan did such a nice job, like with so many different ways to think about it. If I were to like add some summary notes, one, there is truly a connection between mental and physical health.
Mhm.
So when Dan's talking about like going out, doing something, workout, fitness, whatever, that is equally important to you seeking, something that sounds a little bit more mental healthy too. And you taking care of your mental health can actually help your physical health as well.
Mhm.
There's a lot of information about that, even for specific diseases,
Mhm.
cardiovascular disease,
Mhm.
cancer, et cetera. So, there's truly a full body connection. The second thing, I mentioned it, breath work. It doesn't have to be this crazy, uh, spiritual thing for you. Every person's going to have a different version of it. I mentioned before, I do breath work and or separate myself from stressful situations with my eyes open. I don't really close my eyes very often. That's my version of meditation.
Mm.
Last but not least, and I love that Dan said it, and we talk a lot about this in the market that I work in within digital mental health. People think about mental health as all the negative things, but the most important part, and actually, Janet, you mentioned this too, with the development component, is gratitude. Gratitude and self-gratitude is, I like to call it the bow on top, right? You're going to tackle things that are stressing you out. Maybe you don't feel anything a certain day, but gratitude is kind of the thing that you can always count on as the foundation. So making sure you find ways to practice that every day is very important. So
I like you. You're a great guy.
thanks,
Dan is
Dan.
I say
grateful
back.
for
No,
Tim.
tell me.
Dan, I don't just like you, Dan. I love you as a brother.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
so glad that we're friends
Tim,
because
I love you too. Let's look at each other in the eyes.
okay, and stare.
I love you.
I love you too, Dan.
I think
I love
this
you,
is
Tim.
this is
I love
somewhat
you,
of a well-being
Dan, even
exercise
more.
that's happening
I
right
love you, Tim.
But all joking aside,
Wow.
male friendships,
I love it.
you
Male
showing
friendships, yeah.
gratitude to your male friendships is also part of that mental health journey. And I think if
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
unable to do that, think about that.
yeah.
That was amazing.
I love you, Janet.
I love you too, Dan.
I
Are we
lo-
going to
I
stare
lo-
deeply into each other's eyes now?
Well, we love you too, Helen.
I love you, Helen.
I love you guys too.
I love you too.
You're great, Helen.
Us just in a Spotify studio space, just chilling, saying I love you to each other. I love it.
Well, thank you so much, Dan and Tim, for being on our show again for the fourth time.
This is
Thanks
such
for
a
having
good
us.
conversation.
Yeah.
I felt like it was just us in a room.
Yeah.
No, this is
so
so
nice.
good. We really Bubba Gumped this. This is like a really
Totally.
yeah. No, like this is a really good experience. Like I'm so happy that we got to do this with you guys. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we went through some very deep things, some very serious topics around mental health, but we also kind of just also debriefed on a really fun excursion that we went on together as a group of friends to do a breathing, like almost spa-like experience. So whatever it is that resonated with you, we hope that you take away just maybe being more in touch with being able to talk about your feelings, being mindful of what you're thinking about, maybe checking out some like well-being experiences with friends. If, like Tim had shared before, it might be a little intimidating to do on your own. But yeah, that's pretty much today's episode. Thank you again for joining. What's the thing that we can ask people to do in the comments?
How do you de-stress?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Can you share in the comments how you de-stress?
What are some easy, quick, tangible things?
Easy, quick ways to de-stress.
Ooh, whatever
I'll do
that was.
Yeah.
I'll leave this down. And with that, we'll catch you all on the next episode.
Bye.
Before we wrap today's episode, we want to say thank you so much to those who have joined our ABG Besties, our Supercast. If you haven't checked it out yet, abg.supercast.com.
And today's ABG bestie that we're going to be shouting out is Stephanie Tran. Stephanie, thank you so much for supporting us. We so appreciate you and hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Thanks, Stephanie.